Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at exercise 14 in SolidWorks 2020. Now, as you can see, the part I have up already is a valve cover for a car, and you can actually locate that if you go to the Vertanu 1 webpage. So just type in VERT as in Tom, AN as in Nancy, UX1.com, and then go to the Part Files tab, and the red column are the SolidWorks files. Find the exercise 14 part, click on it, it should download, and then you can just click on it, it should launch. I had some interesting things happen when I tried to launch it. I ended up having to close SolidWorks and then open it from SolidWorks versus the quick launch. I don't know if it's why exactly. Eventually I got it to work though. So uh, put a little note down if that happens to you or if something strange happens. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead. We need to prepare this so that it could actually be molded. And this is an aluminum casting, so it needs a lot of fillets. It's going to need draft. And so this exercise deals a lot with editing parts and such. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is look at adding draft. First thing, if you want, go ahead and double click on this surface right here of the oil inlet. You'll see the dimension appears. Try right clicking on it now and go to edit feature. Now when we look at edit feature here, we could look at the extrusion. It says it's 4.450 for the height. What you notice is that the draft was turned off. Go ahead and check that draft on. And we're just going to add 1 degree draft. Now, beware with aluminum castings, typically you want more draft than that, but just to keep things simple, we're just going to typically put on just 1 degree here. And hit the green check. Now, we've seen that that's updated. And visually, if you look hard enough, it does look like there's a little bit of draft on there. But let's take a look at a tool that's going to help us identify where draft is and where it's needed. So go to the Evaluate tab and find Draft Analysis. And go ahead and select Draft Analysis. Now click on this top inner surface here. And a little arrow will be pointing upward. That's the direction of pull. So essentially you have to select the direction how it's going to be pulled from or where it's going to be pulled from. And then you'll get this information here. Now, you can see there's positive draft is green, requires draft is yellow, and negative draft is red. Now we want the whole outer shell pretty much to be green. That's going to let us know that it has draft everywhere, that we need it. The inside is should all be red. And we shouldn't really see much of any yellow. Now, here's the thing. We did add draft to this surface, and as we hover over it, it will tell you that there's 1 degree there, but why isn't it showing up? Well, look at here. The default analysis parameter is set to 3. Let's change it to 1. Hit enter. And now we can actually see that that's in the green zone, so we're in good shape. Just hit the green check mark, and you can actually work with it on, and it's very useful. All right, now let's look at the bulk of the part here. We can see that the outer surfaces here do not have draft. Now, if we click on that, and then actually click on Edit Feature, sadly, we see that it was designed from the side and extrudes. And I say sadly in terms of we can't go here and add draft in this direction because it's going to shrink it in the wrong parameters. So we have to think of a different way we can add draft. So hit the green check mark, don't add draft on that. Okay, what we're going to add, the way we're going to add draft is we're going to use a more manual method. First of all, the little bar down here, it's called the rollback bar, that blue bar. Get your pointer over it. It's in the right at the very bottom of the feature tree. Click on it. Now remember, this feature tree is basically history. It's a history timeline. So imagine that this bar is like a little time machine and it takes you back. Go ahead and get it right above cut extrude 1 and between boss extrude. Release it, and you can see everything underneath it has been suppressed. It's still there, but wherever our timeline bar is, we could see the basics of the model. So now we could actually add the draft. Now, mind you, those of you working in industry already know this. When you're adding draft on something like this, you have to talk to sometimes you have to talk to the engineers that designed it, um, and say, hey, can I alter draft here? If I add draft here, it's going to shrink this section, or it might grow this section. Depends on how you add the draft. So it's always a good idea to check with them in advance. And we're going to pretend that we checked with them and they said, yeah, just keep the base the same because the bolts, those holes are going to line up to the engine block, or the manifold. So let's now, we can see the top is right there in green, the bottom's red, and we want the sides. So here's what you could do. Go to Features, the tab, and go to Draft. And we have 1 degree set up. Notice there's neutral plane, parting line, and step draft. There's 3 methods. Neutral plane we're going to use today. I will show you actually parting line and step draft. I'll give you an example of where it came into play, but we won't actually use that one today. All right, now the neutral plane is going to be that red surface underneath, so select that. That doesn't change, remember, because we don't want that to grow or shrink, because if it does, the holes are going to be disrupted, the hole locations. So select that. But now there's a little arrow, and click on that little arrow so it points up, because we want it to shrink as it goes upward from that red surface. Okay, faces to draft. Rather than select all 4 faces manually, use face propagation and just say select outer faces. And now hit the green check. And now we added that feature in. Look at that. We added it back in time. Went back, added it in, and now let's cross our fingers and hope we don't have any adverse effects here. I'm just going to drag down a few at a time up to the shell. And we see that there's draft here. Now here's a little segment that was missed. And if I actually am not going to go through how to fix that, I want my students to figure it out and fix that, and you'll get an extra 5 credit points. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. All right, I'm going to drag it all the way down. And look at that, we have draft. Now let's take a look at this one here. That surface needs draft as well. Now this one, we're going to go ahead and add parting line draft because it's at an angle. I'll be honest, we don't really need to add parting line draft necessarily at this, unless we wanted it to stay stationary at the base, which that's actually what we want. But let's go to draft. Let's go to parting line. And now, again, 1 degree. Direction of pull is going to be this top surface. And the parting lines are going to be these edges. And you'll have to rotate. It appears that the X-ray selection tool doesn't work when it's in this mode. So you should get like an L shape there. All right, hit the green check, and there it is. Draft has been added. So that's how you use parting line draft. Parting line draft is when it's not a planar parting line. Okay, this one was kind of at an angle. All right, now we need to add not parting line draft, but draft on these surfaces here. So to add draft on those, that's really not too bad. Let's go to draft, select the underside face, and we'll repeat what we did earlier. Just hit this little arrow pointing up, and then outer faces. Oh, we still have parting line. So make sure you turn to neutral plane. By the way, there is Draft Expert. I'm not going to go through that today. It does have some neat functionality, but we're not going to use it. Make sure you're in manual, by the way, if I meant to tell you that initially. Okay, so faces to draft, select outer faces, and hit the green check. Now we have some of these faces we have to add. What if we added them to the original? So let's see, click on the side face of here, and we can see there's the dimensions. Now you could sometimes add the dimensions if it was built, if it were built inside SolidWorks, we could, and it is actually in this case, we could actually add the draft in the sketch and have it go across with draft on it. We would then have to put draft on the side faces, which isn't a big deal. However, we're not going to do it that way. Instead, let's go to the draft tool. So find draft, select for the neutral plane, right click in here, delete that, select this face here, and go to faces to draft and select this one, this one, this one. The outer faces doesn't really work well on this. Now, let's try something and see what happens. Let's try and add draft to all these simultaneously. And see what happens. This is really interesting, okay? So we've added to those side faces, and we're ready to hit the green check. All right, looks like it worked, but hit your space bar and go to the right view orientation. And something might look a little funny. Why don't we check? Let's go to measure these. They look a little bit different. Go to evaluate, go to measure. Okay, this one up here is 0.2. All right, that's what specified. Try this one, 0.209. Click on it again to disable it. 0.218. Click on it to disable it. 0.228. They're growing as they get further down the chain. Think of it this way. Try and stack all these from here to here, and that is the growth or the widening as it goes downward from the neutral plane. So that's not an acceptable way to do this because we could really screw it up that way. Okay, so let's hit escape, turn off the measure tool. Let's go back to features and let's fix this. Let's go back down here to draft 4, edit the feature, clear the selections, and then just select those faces here. All right, that's in one. Now, some might think, well, why didn't the others update? Remember, this was actually a pattern. The way you can find out, if you click on the side face here, you'll see L pattern 1. And the boss is right above it. Now, it didn't update because, remember last time we added a feature, we used the rollback bar, that little blue bar, to go back in time and add it. So instead of using the rollback bar this time, let's try another method. Grab that draft 4 and try and drag it between L pattern 1 and boss extrude 5. Okay, I didn't get it quite there. One more. There we go. Okay, now it still hasn't updated, but that's only because we haven't added it to our list in the pattern. So right click on L pattern 1, edit feature, and now from this little arrow here, you'll find draft. Click on draft 4 and hit the enter tool. And now it's added. So there you can see when you're editing parts, you're dealing with time and when that comes into play. So you might have to bring it back in time, and you could do that using the rollback bar. Drag that up, insert, drag it back down. You could use it just by adding the feature at the bottom and dragging that up and relocating it too. So there's a number of ways we could have addressed this. All right, now as far as these ones go, you could add them to this too. So let's go to draft, select this as our neutral plane, and then let's proceed to select these faces here, here. Let's try these ones too. Now don't try the holes because the holes are drilled. They don't need draft. Those are going to be drilled out when the casting comes out of the mold. So we're actually going to fill them with knockouts, or what they call knockouts, where you basically fill it. Let's get these ones on this side. Now these might be a little tricky because we have a fillet. Let's see if it errors out. Sometimes when you have the fillet on there, you have to actually remove the fill to get it on, but I'm gonna try it. I'll be honest, I've never selected those little slivers. I always tell students in the past, like, oh, you know what, do that on your own if you like. Okay, let's hit the green check, and we get an error. Could not construct draft. Okay, let's clear that out. Let's see if we could just get at least these in. So select that one and this one. Let's see if it works. Okay, that works. So these ones with the fillet, just beware if you want to get those in. They are really small, and working in mold design, especially with plastics, if it's a very small little segment, sometimes it's like, oh, it'll be okay. That's just a very tiny little, if it's 10 thousandths of an inch, just leave it. But talk to your manager before you do that. Don't take my word on it every time. But with metals, sometimes you want to deal with it. But I think we'll be okay. You could add those in if you like. Now, the way to add them in would be to find that fillet. There it is, and roll back and add the draft after or before the fillet. Okay, we're not going to do that. Just wanted to show you can add those in. All right, now we have to start filling in these knockouts. So select this face here and go to suppress. And we can see all three of those holes were one feature that got suppressed. Now over here, not so easy. That's a hole, it's shelled. So what we need to do is we're going to right click on it and edit the feature and then deselect that face and then hit the green check. And for these holes, select this face, start a sketch. And while the face is still selected, hit Convert Entities, and then right-click on this second little edge here and select Loop. And it should go all the way around. If it doesn't, flip that arrow and then that might work. Now hit Convert Entities again, and look, we've made a segment in there. We can now go to Features, Extrude Boss Base, and just have it extrude down to the bottom edge. So those are all filled in. Now, with plastic injection molding, usually you don't fill those things in. There's not usually a drilling process with plastics. And you'll see if you take the molding class, we actually talk about how that's done. This is a little bit different. Okay, now we have to go to fillet. Now you could go and put the fillets in on all these edges, like 60 thousandths. There's more reasons than just aesthetics that you put fillets in, especially for aluminum castings. There's areas that if those edges are sharp, especially right here, when the material starts to shrink or cool, it shrinks, and then little cracks can be formed, and then it's a weak area. So what you want to do, like in an area like this, we've got to add a fillet. Now, not just a regular fillet, we're going to add a thicker fillet, like it's almost like a spider web. So this is kind of neat. I think you'll enjoy seeing this. All right, so as far as this goes, let's put in 60 thousandths for the radius. And I want you to control select. Actually, you don't even have to hold control select them. Just select those three instances there. And then click on setback parameters. Set this to 0.06 as well. And then click on this little button here and select the intersection point. Now you see the setback box appear. Double click on the first one, and yours might vary from mine. My first one is this length here. If yours is showing a different one, keep trying until you find that one right there, and that's going to be 0.25. Okay, double click on the next one. And this one, mine is showing the long edge. So this is going to be 0.4. Now, mind you, if you don't get them right, you'll get a little error message here. Now, the next one going vertical, that one's going to be 0.25. Now, look at what it's creating. I told you, it's kind of like a spider web almost. It's adding a thickened approach there, and hit the green check. And that's going to help prevent a cracking effect. All right, so setback fillet, neat fillet to use. All right, let's go to fillet. And filleting is really an art. It can be quite tricky at times. And it's all about order. And sometimes you just can't put a fillet in certain areas. And what we would do when I worked in industry, we would note that in a drawing, and we would let them put it in manually. Either they could put it in the CAM software with surfaces. You could probably do it in here too. There usually could get it to work if it's real geometry. So anyhow, all right, I'm going to hit the green check. I'm going to go to fillet again, and we'll leave it at 60 thousandths. We'll select this edge here, and that edge right there, and hit the green check. We could actually turn off our draft analysis. So go to Evaluate, turn off draft analysis. Might be a little bit easier to see. Okay, and so as far as fillets go, make sure you just put fillets every like between 60 and 30 thousandths fillets. So like I'm gonna select this face here, I can select that face. This one will probably error it out. Sure enough, when you see that the fillet preview disappears, that means it didn't like that one. Okay, so let's try this edge here. Okay, that's good enough for this exercise. So as you could see with part editing, this isn't just necessarily an application for mold making. Part editing, it happens all the time. But at the same token, note that if you ever do work in plastic injection molding, or if you work in castings, there's a lot of great jobs out there for that type of thing. Very difficult. I mean, all jobs are difficult, but having worked in that industry, it's pretty stressful. All right, just make sure you save this, do a file, save as, just so you can keep the original, and just call E14. Space over this. Okay, and so when we come back next week, we're going to go ahead and learn how to make mold. Now there's a couple ways to make mold. We're going to learn the tried and true original way that SolidWorks has been doing it from the very beginning. They have some new fancy tools, as I call them. They're new being that they've been in there for about 20 years, but these predate, like these are tools in here are probably 25 years old that we're going to use coming up in the next exercise. And the reason I choose to show them is because they always work. Whereas the other tools, they're actually great. They could actually be much faster, but your parts have to be perfect. And if you're not building the parts in-house, if you're getting them from somewhere else, sometimes you've got some work you have to do. So I like to show both methods. All right, and that concludes exercise 14.